across the globe, I understood various social and corporate culture. Later, my 25 years of journey as a politician, I got the privilege of being a part of many successful government welfare development schemes. As Swapna mentioned just now, Arugshri was one of the such great scheme introduced by the then Chief Minister, late Sri Y.S. Rajshekar Reddy. With a broad future vision, not only the citizens, but many corporates also got benefited with the Arugshri scheme. I have seen many other public-private partnership projects in my different tenures. As a Professor Williams mentioned in his book, it's the profit with purpose and drives the world. As an advisor of the equipment foundations and closely associated with this platform, I firmly believe the cross-sector partnership is the need of the hour. We have sensed this phenomena way back 10 years ago and brought CSR NGOs, philanthropists and NRI together to accomplish social task. 108 services was a such best fit model of the CSR initiatives. You should remember CSR was not obligatory in India that time, but we introduced this model and made it a grand success to the public. So we have learned panel members here who came. We can elaborately discuss this subject, but I have a request from my side. I am an Indian politician and this event is related to Indian book launch of social values. I wish there will be more discussions on the subject in the interest of our country also. Thank you all.
Discussion on an idea that is at the same time very powerful, a little new, and yet very ancient. And this fascinating book captures the evolution of this idea from its early stages in America, various political ideas which made this possible as of this moment. I was a little concerned, Professor Mek, when they announced your name and you took that chair. From where I sit, I see you've taken an extreme left position on a subject which assumes pure capitalism is dead. So as we start this discussion, I'll begin the first 10 minutes to 15 minutes on pure political economic questions. I would not only involve Professor Mek, but also go to Dr. Parkala Prabhakar to give us the Indian contextual equivalents, sometimes similarities, sometimes differences. And then we will move on to the actual framework. But my first question to you, isn't this book an assumption that pure capitalism is dead, that the private sector and government should not work in silos, and the pursuit of profit as the answer to everything is no longer valid?
In my view, and we have people who are much more expert than I am, particularly about economics and global trends, but I think the era of pure capitalism as an ideal to pursue ended with the Great Depression, which we know a lot about in relation to the United States, but enveloped the entire world. And I think even the most ardent free market advocate, from a practical, leave the theory aside for the moment, recognized that there were inherent flaws that a totally free market could solve and would solve if you gave it enough time. I think the story that people probably don't know is that Franklin Roosevelt was both loved and hated at his time and since. I grew up very, very poor, and my father was a factory worker, and Franklin Roosevelt was his hero. And the perception was that Roosevelt destroyed capitalism, created big government, and the world was never the same again. But maybe the quintessential part of the New Deal, of Franklin Roosevelt's new approach to society, was the Social Security system. For the first time, that people of low and moderate means would have some security in their retirement. And as he got ready to announce it to the world, very intelligent man, was overcome with panic and fear, saying, I could say it, we could pass it, people will love it, but we can't execute it. We do not have the capacity to make this work. And he went to Tom Watson, the president of IBM. And we know IBM today, but IBM was basically did file cards and accounting and kind of what we now view as like the ultimate. And he said, Tom, what can we do? I can't. He said, don't worry, we can do it. We, IBM, will build the system. It reminds me of what happened in India with Har. And so the Social Security system, the beginning of the end of the free market system in America, was engineered by the private sector for profit. So I think the truth of the matter is, very early on in the 20th century, pure capitalism ended and public-private partnerships began. And in the book, we try to talk about that evolution. I think what's changed today and what the book is about is that the vast majority of, certainly of younger people, of millennials and younger in the world, is that you cannot and should not separate the private sector from social impact, that the two things need to move in tandem. And if you follow the news, Ray Dalio, the largest hedge fund in the world, the recent national convention or international convention of businessmen, all concluded with the idea that business and social responsibility need to be married ahead. So yes, the free market, you know, cowboy capitalism is dead.
In all fairness, the days of the robber barons, as they were called, the early billionaires turned philanthropists, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the 1929 Great Depression is treated at reasonable length for you to give a context of how the New Deal really is a landmark event in American history, which changed and redefined perhaps the understanding and acceptance of what should be the scope of government. And of course, as it evolved through the times of Eisenhower, Kennedy, and then of course the era where somebody would say capitalism found a new champion in Ronald Reagan and across the pond Margaret Thatcher, and then, but in India the timelines are slightly different. We have had an extraordinary run of socialism from Pandit Nehru right on till 1991, when the man Dr. Prabhakar once said, P.V. Narasimha Rao, who could remain silent in 16 languages, brought in that kind of a liberalization in India. So what I'd like to ask you, Dr. Prabhakar, is the social impact than immediate or quarterly mindset profit too early for a country? We have not had that kind of a run of the free market to expect most entrepreneurs in India to start looking at social value or impact investing. Is this idea, is the time right for India to look at this idea?
Allow me to say a few words about the impressions that I have had about the book. It's an excellent work, Professor. When I saw both your names, I thought you would mainly concentrate on the American experience. But contrary to my expectations, you have looked at many cases across the world, and very insightful. you have given, as Swapna was saying about 3 Ps. In fact, I have 2 Ps in my own mail. And Professor talks about 5 Ps. Process, people, place, performance,
Portfolio.
yeah, portfolio, and then performance. What distinguishes this book, Sriram, from, there's a lot of literature on this, but what distinguishes this book from the other works is that it lays down a framework. If you want to do this kind of a work, takes that kind of an initiatives, you have something like, these 2 professors have probably spent days and hours of their time thinking about what should be the process, how should it be handheld, etc., etc. So that way, anybody who is thinking of going in for such initiatives, this book would be very, very helpful. Now, coming back to the Indian experience, India relatively is a new state. It's just 70-year-old. As Professor Amikke said, it was post-depression, Great Depression, that the state started, expanding its role. But not exactly. Look at the Japanese experience after the Meiji Restoration, 1868 onwards. The state started playing a huge role in investment, in industry, in protection, in export, and a host of other things which impacted, even education, universities, funding, etc. Now come to Germany, immediately after the unification of Germany, 1870, Bismarck later, and then you have the social security, what our former minister Pitan Satyanarayana was saying about the state intervening into the, now the social security, if people here may recall, it was started way back in the 1870s by Bismarck. And then, of course, you had this crisis in the 30s, Great Depression, and then comes that immediately after that, you have the Beveridge Report in the UK. Immediately after the war, the Labour government came, and the Labour government started talking about insurance, talking about social security, talking about food subsidies, talking about the National Health Service, host of other things. You have full expansion of state. Now, there are scholars who have seen these things as the first revolution, the second revolution, the third revolution, the fourth revolution now. I'm not talking about the fourth industrial revolution. I'm talking about the process by which the state has been defined and redefined successively. There were times when people were very disgusted with the state because of its inefficiencies, because of its red tapeism, because of its delays, because of its political interference with market forces, etc. But tell me honestly, has there ever been a perfect capitalist system ever on the globe? Has there ever been a perfect competition? It wasn't there. Always there was some kind of a state intervention, starting from the Corn Laws, you had all this. But then, the kind of domains that the state has got into, the government has got into, after the Second World War especially, has also produced a huge reaction against it. So much so, you had Milton Friedman and other people I believe Milton Friedman once said, the government is such that you put government in charge of the Sahara Desert, and in 5 years, you will have sand scarcity. That's the kind of opinion that people had about the government and the government involvement in the economy, involvement in so many other things. But you see, if you want me to say something about the Indian experience, we as an independent state came into being in 1947, immediately after the end of the World War. The context was the world was divided into two camps, and there was no capital. Capital formation was very low. Literacy rate, I think, was about 12%. You won't believe, people don't even remember. India, when it got independence, the literacy rate was just about 12%. So in that context, the government had to do everything. It has become a Ma-Baap government. Today, say for instance, look at Hyderabad. Hyderabad is Hyderabad today because in the 60s we had IDPL, we had BHEL, we had a host of public sector undertakings which created infrastructure, which created employment, which created and after that, when the private capital formation had started, then you had the other things coming in. So, historically speaking, what Britain went through after Second World War, what Germany went through, what Japan went through, and immediately after depression, what the United States had gone through, India has embarked on the same kind of a path, and immediately after the World War II, the general economic ecosystem, the thinking, economic thinking was for the state to do everything. So much so, we got into even making bread. We had modern bread. The interventions about cooperative farming, bringing in the peasant, bringing in cooperative banking, cooperative industry, cooperative manufacturing, did not take off because everybody started looking at the government. So that has been the experience. Now today, lots of changes have taken place, especially after 1991. We all realize that the government is not an efficient agency to deliver. And now we have realized, we have gone back to, the kind of civil society initiatives that used to happen before independence and even before the colonization. You had no government school before we were colonized. There was no government university before we were colonized. There was no government-run places for resting like chowdhuries. It was all done by the civil society, by the businesses, by big people, philanthropy, rich people, etc., etc. Then itself, we had realized there is a nyaya in Sanskrit. Nashtasva dagdha radha nyayam. Nashtasva dagdha radha nyayam. Two people set out on a journey. They went. After covering a bit of a distance, they rested for the evening. They went into the chowdhury. They slept. They came out in the morning. When they came out, one person saw his horses were missing. The other person found that his chariot was burnt down. Dagdharadha, Nashtastra. What did they do? Oh, my chariot is burnt, but I have my horses. You don't have horses, but your chariot is all right. So, harness your horses to my chariot and we can continue the journey. Today, India and probably the rest of the world is at the cusp of this Nashtastra Dagdharada Nyayam, where government is inefficient, bring the private sector, bring the philanthropy, bring in other partners, do the cross-sectoral synergies, bring them all together and go ahead. So, now, the book is very timely, Sriram, that it gives us a framework, it gives us the entire 5 stages of how do we handhold. And Indian case studies, yes, they have dealt with one, but they could have dealt with many. In fact, a huge, full volume about Indian experience, I think it merits their attention and anybody's attention. So, with this kind of a background in India, I think this framework, I think, is going to be extremely helpful.
Keynes versus Friedman discussion, inflation versus shortfall of demand leading to a recession. We're not getting there. I have read the book, and you know, the Aadhaar case from India, the analysis of Brazil, failure in the Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. The book has its final. It says it's a dynamic work, insights as they come. But the two professors also warn us, big without being strong or effective. A quick example, the book begins in Hyderabad. They all came together and made a park close to my free industrialists making billions and then giving back to society. And your own co-authors, grandfathers, a kind of example, that revolutionary announcement, not a part of my wealth, but everything I've earned back to society.
First one, I don't think there's any sector or any aspect of policy that's necessarily exempt from the approach. I think the motivation for the approach is when existing systems, public, private, social, are not able to do it. So I think it's these cross-sector partnerships are complicated, they take time, they're not easy. So I think they should be motivated by need rather than, you know, yes, let's just do this everywhere. So climate, inequality, housing, education, healthcare, these are issues around the world where the government, the nonprofit sector, the private sector have all struggled to try to make it work. So I think they need to work together. So problem driven. In terms of corruption and cronyism and all those things, I think, well, the place-based P really is about community involvement, community engagement, stakeholders at the table, and transparency. So that's the guarantee, I think, if you have that you won't have the corruption. In fact, I would hope, and I see, for example, the Aadhaar approach, which is a multi-sector approach, is actually controlling corruption that existed before when the programs were entirely government. So I think yet, as you say, the Olympics in Brazil, we have a good case from Brazil and a bad case. And the bad case is the Olympics, and the reason why it was bad is the deals were made in private with the public officials and the leading corporations, no transparency, no public involvement, secrets about what the deals were. So I think it can be dealt with, but it takes work. But I think there's enough reason to believe that this is an approach that can work, that has worked, and will work again.
Sustainability. Versus, would you take a hit on your next quarterly top line and bottom line and invest for social impact. Yes, the millennials want it, but they're not yet in control. He talks about how $60 billion, $1 trillion of wealth would transfer to the next generation in the next 3 to 4 decades, but they're still away from policy making. So I'd like to ask all of you this. I'll just ask a question, you can raise your hand as a vote. How many of you believe business should be done only for profit?
And I would argue, particularly for poor communities, disadvantaged communities, technology is potentially the most beneficial thing in the world for them. They can provide, in large places like India and China, world-class education and world-class healthcare that will never happen, would never happen, did never happen through the traditional bricks and mortar, let's build a school, let's create the teachers.
Banks were all promoted by corporates, whereas the government that time felt that for inclusive growth and for social objectives and reaching out to the masses and covering them in terms of liabilities, that is getting their savings and then getting into productive investments and getting them a means of income, the bank should be nationalized. So if you see the banking growth also, it is only after nationalization the banks have expanded substantially. And even today, around 70% of the market share in terms of business is done by the public sector bank. But for the last 2-3 years of pain, but even in that, in terms of social banking or in terms of priority sector lending, in terms of loan to the marginal farmers, micro and small enterprises, or small business, on traders, that and also the retailers, means the individuals, that loan has shown substantial increase. And it is only the corporate book has been slightly slowed down. So the fact is that even in terms of the government objective also, if we can recall, that whenever the government was not able to get the necessary majority next time, they found that unless it is inclusive growth, the mere GDP growth would not make the general public any enthusiasm. So only when they found, I think sometime during that the government immediately changed their focus in inclusive growth. So even our current government that I was sharing with the professor, that as soon as our Prime Minister joined in the last term, in the 2014, he gave the call to on the 15th of August to all the banks that I would like the Jan Dhan account to be opened by the bank in a period of 3 months, 30 crores. The banks, only the public sector bank, the private sector bank were very slow in that. The public sector bank responded and opened 30 crores of Jan Dhan accounts, and 23 crores of RuPay card was issued to them. So that is where that later concept of JAM, that is Jan Dhan account, then each one having Aadhaar and mobile. So even when you asked the question how the technology, had that not been in technology, achieving this 30 crores in a 3 months time would not have been possible. So we should of course appreciate the efforts of all the public sector banks, and those 30 crores accounts are resulted in around 7 crores of government subsidy going to the directly to the DBT, that is a direct benefit transfer, and the government could save more than 1 lakh crore which were otherwise going to the wrong hands. So as far as the capitalism also, or that your industrialist, now all of them have also felt unless there is an ecosystem built in terms of social impact, their business cannot expand. So the business in terms of profitability or all other things will depend on the now very fact that currently the rural economy is not doing well. That has resulted in the slowdown in the economy.
Sorry, when you said rural economy is not doing well,
Yeah, the problem is actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger, day by day. The longer that you don't actually address the set of problems that are plaguing us, the bigger the problems are becoming. When the problem is bigger and it becomes gigantic in size, you need a player that's big enough to start the change. That's where governments come in. Now, I would put everybody into three categories. Somebody voluntarily doing it, right? So that voluntary thing existed since the mankind ever existed on this planet. Now, in some cases, it's really voluntary. You and I will go and then give some change to the society. In some cases, religions do bring in, all of us, except for the atheists, right? All of us, in some ways, contribute through the name, in the name of the religion, do contribute in a lot many ways that you can actually think of. And then you have the extreme left wing. I don't know, left wing as in, not as in
That
left and
depends
right.
on that side or this side.
Right,
He
right.
looks left from here, from their perspective is right. So.
Right. That left wing needs to be goaded, needs to be, literally shaken up to get out of their slumber, to recognize the problem and then partake in that process. Right? That's where the 2% that you're thinking of or you're referring to, that's where the 2% comes in. That is not to impose a penalty or a tax in some wonderful way on corporates. It's actually make them wake up from their slumber, recognize that, awaken that feeling that they probably had, hidden in them. When they get up and then realize they may be the best ones that you have in terms of contributors that they were otherwise not participating earlier. Right? So you are now shaking the tree up to make sure that the slumber is gone, and then they come participate in these movements that the world needs. And then you have the middlemen, not as in middlemen in the trade, who always are doing already today. They are taking those corporate social responsibility without taking the name. You see so many schools getting adopted in Hyderabad and in so many states. Take 6 for example, that last mile connectivity is a global problem. It's not easy for somebody to take that brave heart and then attempt. He said it took 4 years. In 4 years, I think hundreds and thousands of enterprises would have been dead. Very few people actually have that muscle and the willpower to stay put through that journey. And then so many examples you will find it, right? The attempt here that we have done in providing our technology partnership with Equip is to bring that awareness. In the traditional societies, you show an example, a model, and then so many people are willing to walk that path. So many people are willing, so many corporates wanting to go that path. They're waiting for that, you said, father of the nation, Gandhi, to, stand there and, do the call. Maybe, you need, Bill Gates and, books from Professor M.E.K., come out and then bring in that awaken feeling for everybody, for all of us to, recognize, really participate, and Equip, for that matter, does the same thing. It brings in various possible alternatives onto a platform for everybody to see. Today, I was just talking to Professor M.K. The biggest challenge all of us have is, I would like to contribute, but I don't know, am I contributing to the right cause?
Because it has a way of bringing together the private sector, the social sector, and government in cross-sector partnerships, which working together, they can accumulate both the power and the capital necessary to solve the big problems we face, like sustainability and inequality, education, and healthcare for all. Oh, so Mr. Buffett, Howard Buffett, who was my student, we began working on this book in 2007. So it was published just last year in 2018. So over a decade of work and research around the world, and we're still going. We're moving to other countries and other examples and other areas like affordable housing to keep the idea going and hopefully create platforms around the world where individual investors can put their money behind things that they believe in. Because India, along change or course the the future of the world. The countries are so big, and their companies are all over the world. And if we get it right in India and get it right in China and make it better in the U.S., it will make the world better. So India is pivotal to the future of the world, and it has 1.3 billion people in India, so it's important. Yes, so I think the solutions are largely local. We can have big ideas that can be applied, but every solution needs to be localized, and therefore the state and the local communities have to be at the table. They have to be part of the solution, not just served by the solution. Well, I think, again, what we need are solutions that are not country or company specific. We need to draw capital into partnerships that provide solutions. So while I think corporate social responsibility is wonderful and it's a great idea, I think it doesn't have the impact it could have. As I mentioned in the conference, Warren Buffett was wise enough to say, I don't really understand how to do social impact, so I'm going to give my corporate social responsibility money to someone who does. And I think that's our approach.
ఇప్పుడు ఇది కార్పొరేట్ సోషల్ రెస్పాన్సిబిలిటీ అనేది కాన్సెప్ట్ ఇండియాలో కొత్తగా గవర్నమెంట్ ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేసింది. అయితే ఇంట్రడక్షన్ అవ్వకముందే చాలా కార్పొరేట్స్ వాలంటరీగా చాలా ప్రోగ్రామ్స్ చేసినాయి. సైంట్ చాలా స్కూల్స్ని అడాప్ట్ చేసుకున్నాయి. ఆ విధంగా చాలా కంపెనీస్ చేస్తున్నాయి. అటువంటి ప్రాజెక్ట్స్లో ఏవి ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ మంచివి, ఏ ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ మంచివి కాదనేది కార్పొరేట్స్కి చాలామందికి తెలియదు. ఆ ప్లాట్ఫామ్ మేము ఏదైతే క్రియేట్ చేసామో, ఎక్విప్ అనే ప్లాట్ఫామ్ బోట్రీ అనే కంపెనీ నుంచి ప్రపంచంలో ఏ ప్రాజెక్ట్ ఉన్నా కూడా దాని మీద అప్లోడ్ చేయొచ్చు. ఏ వ్యక్తి అయినా, ఏ ఆర్గనైజేషన్ అయినా సరే దాన్ని క్రౌడ్ రేట్ చేయొచ్చు. ఇది బాగుంటుంది, ఇది బాగోదు, ఈ చేంజెస్ చేయాలి, ఇంత డొనేషన్, వాళ్ళు ఎక్స్ప్రెషన్ ఆఫ్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఇవ్వచ్చు అనమాట. మేము దీంట్లో పార్టిసిపేట్ చేస్తాము, ఈ ప్రాజెక్ట్లో మేము ఇదిగో $10 ఇస్తాం, లేకపోతే $100 ఇస్తాము అనేది వాళ్ళు ఎక్స్ప్రెస్ చేయొచ్చు. అటువంటి ఇంట్రెస్ట్లను తీసుకొచ్చి ఎవరైతే ప్రాజెక్ట్ అప్లోడ్ చేశారో వాళ్ళకి చెప్తాం, ఇగో ఈ 118 మంది 121 మంది ఎక్స్ప్రెషన్ ఇచ్చారు అని చెప్తాం అనమాట. సో దాన్ని బట్టి వాళ్ళు ఎంత చేయాలి ప్రాజెక్ట్ అనేది డిసైడ్ చేసుకుంటారు. అది కంటిన్యూస్ ప్రాజెక్ట్, అక్కడితో ఆగిపోనక్కర్లేదు. ఫిక్స్డ్ టైం పీరియడ్ అని ఉండకపోవచ్చు. ఈ 3 నెలలు వచ్చేసిన తర్వాత బాగుంటే కనుక మళ్ళీ అదే ప్రాజెక్ట్ మళ్ళీ అప్లోడ్ చేయొచ్చు. సో అటువంటిదంతా కూడా ఒక ప్రాజెక్టు రిపోర్ట్స్ అన్నీ కూడా తీసుకొచ్చి ఒక ప్లాట్ఫామ్ మీద పెట్టడం వలన అందరికీ మంచి జరుగుతుంది అనమాట. సో ఇది ఆ కాన్సెప్ట్ తీసుకొచ్చి బోట్రీ అనే కంపెనీ దీనికి టెక్నాలజీ పార్ట్నర్షిప్ ఇచ్చిందనమాట. మేము లాస్ట్ ఇయర్ లాంచ్ చేసాము, బీటా లాంచ్. ఫ్యూ కంపెనీస్ స్టార్టెడ్ ఆల్రెడీ, అండ్ ఈ సంవత్సరం ఎండ్ నుంచి తప్పనిసరిగా దీన్ని పెద్దగా లాంచ్ చేయదలుచుకున్నాం. టైఅప్స్ వస్తాయి ప్లేస్లోకి. ఆయనకి మాలో రైట్ సో సోషల్ వాల్యూ ఇన్వెస్టింగ్ అనేది మేము చేసే కాన్సెప్ట్ 2 మ్యాచ్ అయినాయి. ఆయన చెప్పారు కదా ఇంతకుముందు 2007లో మొదలుపెట్టిన వర్క్ అది. సో మేము ఈ కాన్సెప్ట్ మొదలుపెట్టి 3.5 సంవత్సరాలు అయింది. ఈ ప్లాట్ఫామ్ చేయడం అనేది చిన్న విషయం కాదు. ఒక కంపెనీకి ఆధారిత ప్లాట్ఫామ్ కాకూడదు. ఇది వరల్డ్ గుడ్ చేయగలగాలి. మనకి ఎస్పెషల్లీ ఇండియాకి ఏమని జరుగుతుంది, కార్పొరేట్స్ ఏం చేయగలుగుతాయి అనేది మనం దీంట్లో తీసుకురాగలగాలి. అన్ని ప్రాజెక్టులు దీని మీదకి రావాలి. అన్ని ప్రాజెక్టులు తీసుకొచ్చినప్పుడు బెస్ట్ ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో, జెన్యూన్ ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో వాటిని మాత్రమే ఇన్వెస్టర్స్ అంతా వచ్చి దీనికి మేము ఇస్తాము అని చెప్పగలిగే పరిస్థితి తీసుకురావాలి. దాన్ని ఇది చిన్న విషయం కాదు, ఈరోజు రేపో జరిగిపోయే విషయం కాదు. 11 సంవత్సరాలు పట్టింది బుక్ రాయడానికి. ఇటువంటి చేంజ్ తీసుకురావడానికి మాకు ఎన్ని సంవత్సరాలు పడుతుందో చూడాలి. దీంట్లో ఇప్పుడు ప్రస్తుతం మేము ఏం చేస్తాం, దాంట్లో ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ అప్లోడ్ చేసి మనలాంటి సిటిజన్స్, కార్పొరేట్స్ అందులోకి వచ్చి ఎక్స్ప్రెషన్ ఆఫ్ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ మాత్రమే ఇచ్చాం. దాంట్లోకి అడిషనల్గా చేయాల్సింది ఏముంది, ఈ ప్రాజెక్ట్ ఎలా జరుగుతుంది, దాన్ని మెజర్మెంట్ ఎలాగా, ఆ మెజర్మెంట్ రిజల్ట్స్ వెనక్కి ప్రాజెక్ట్ స్పాన్సర్కిను డోనర్స్కి కూడా ఇవ్వగలగాలి. సో చాలా పని ఉందన్నమాట ఇది. సో 10 సంవత్సరాల పని ఉంది. అవును, కరెక్ట్. అంటే సోషల్ గుడ్కి మనం చేసేది ఏంటంటే, ఒకటి ప్రాఫిట్ మోటివ్ కాకుండా ఎలా తీసుకురావాలి, మనం క్యాటలిస్ట్ ఎలాగవ్వాలి, ఆ చేంజ్ ఏజెంట్ ఎలాగవ్వాలి, ఆల్ వాక్స్ మనం అందరినీ రీచ్ అవుట్ అవ్వాలి. మతం, రిలీజియన్, లేకపోతే క్యాస్ట్, లేకపోతే వాక్ ఆఫ్ లైఫ్ ఇదేం లేకుండా అందరూ ఉంటేనే కదా సొసైటీ. ఈ సొసైటీలో చేంజ్ రావాలంటే అందరినీ తీసుకుని రావాలి. అందరి దగ్గరికి రీచ్ అవుట్ అయ్యాము, అందరినీ తీసుకుని వచ్చాము. ఇది లిమిటెడ్, ఇంకా రీచ్ ఎక్కువ ఉండాలి. థ్యాంక్ యూ.